one. It's all you, Kyle.
There we go. All right, everyone. I'd just like to say, again, thank you for joining us today. Today we have Darrin Batisky.
Batisky.
Excuse me. Going to speak to us about the importance of emotional intelligence through the seminar that he did at the GIS conference. And I'll leave it over to my treasurer, Ben Rita. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, so just a quick little background about Darrin. Like Kyle said, his seminar he's giving us today is about emotional intelligence for the turf professional, focusing on identifying and use of emotions, positive and negative, in real time, skills for self-management, and de-escalating heightened states of emotion in all situations, and tips for how to build and maintain professional, diverse, and productive relationships. Darrin has a background as a superintendent at 2 golf courses at Chartiers in Pittsburgh and also Glen Oak, and is currently working for Bayer Industries. Their home base is North Carolina, but currently he is working out of the Pittsburgh office. So Darrin, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Good afternoon, everyone.
And Darrin, I wanted to chime in before I muted myself too. Everybody that's in here that's listening, the participants, if you'll notice, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen if you kind of hover over it. If anybody has any questions, try to put them in the Q&A box and we'll get them to be addressed either during or after the seminar. There's also a chat box you can kind of comment on things, but any questions that you want to answer, try to put in the Q&A. That's it, Darrin, it's all you.
Awesome. Thanks, John, again. So thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. Hopefully everybody's well, and we'll just go ahead with this. So, the title of this is, the importance of emotional intelligence. And over the next 30, 35 minutes, we're going to talk about, this idea of emotional intelligence. It's what's going on and how it affects you as a person in the industry. Let's see here. Okay. So just a little bit about the agenda we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence, what it is. I thought it was interesting that I came on here and one of the first questions I was asked, John Kaminsky said, what is this about? What is emotional intelligence? So a little bit about my journey. Why is it important? Some skills training ideas that can help you along the way. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of a take-home message here and a real-world example that you can, a little bit of homework, I guess, for some of you folks, if you want to do a little bit of light reading. So with that, kind of this whole idea of emotional intelligence is really the ability to understand emotions in yourself and others, right? We're all emotional beings. We all of our relationships are emotional based, but because they cannot not be, right? We're emotional. There is a certain amount of population, I guess, that does not really feel emotions, but most of us do. So with that, it also is your ability to use your awareness to manage your behavior and the relationships that you're in, right? So we're all in relationships. We all have to deal with folks. We deal with anything between home life to family life to work. So it's really that foundation for these critical skills that we all kind of been honing over the years, right? So the great thing about it is it's a skill, and a skill can always be honed. It can be practiced. You can get better at it. There was conjecture back in the early 90s where they talked about emotional intelligence. Can it be affected? Can folks get better at it? And they really, the literature has proven that it is a skill and it can be effective. So just a little bit about me and why I'm here today. So this is me, my professional life. Spent about 23 years on a golf course. Don't hold that Ohio State degree against me. I've spent most of my life in Pennsylvania, my professional life. Spent 23 years as a golf course superintendent. So I bring a little bit of credibility here from a management side of managing a golf course. I'm also pretty experienced in presenting and been an invited speaker at a lot of different events. I'm also one of those guys in the industry that I give back. I learned very young as a young turf person that I was told by a mentor, you give back because that's what you do. You give back. So very fortunate there, and I've definitely received more back than I've ever given. There's no question. So with that, as I said, I've been in Pennsylvania for most of my career. I was able to actually talk in 2007 at the Golf Turf Conference. Pete Lansgood invited me to talk about this novel idea. Back in the day, it was internal drainage, right? The XGD system. And then I also presented this at your turf club back in 2008. Probably some of you folks weren't even born yet, right? So Spent, as I said, since 1997 in Pennsylvania as far as my professional career. So a little bit about me and my story and who I am and kind of where I'm from. And this is the personal side, right? The stuff that maybe a lot of us don't know. Maybe you know the professional side of me, but I am a son, I'm a brother, I'm a father, I'm a friend, and I'm an introvert. So I was that guy that pushed yourself outside your comfort zone. I really dreaded and hated getting up in front of people and talking. So I pushed myself outside that comfort zone. And I also say that I'm kind of a paid extrovert, right? I'm in sales, so I need to be able to be out there and put myself out there. Another part about me is I'm dyslexic. Back when I was dyslexic, they didn't know what to do with folks like me. But one of the things that as a dyslexic, I found myself as a compensator, right? I'm that person that says, well, I can't do this. I can't spell, so I'm going to memorize words. I'm going to memorize how to spell words instead of spelling words or using phonics to spell words, right? So this whole idea of programming, I always talk about programming when we're talking about emotions, is that that event between 0 and probably about 22, 23 years of age, you're programmed, right? So I'm the youngest of 5 children. There was 4 boys and a girl in my family, and I'm that youngest. There's a certain amount of programming that happens as the youngest, right? You're the one that gets picked on. You're the one that gets thrown through glass windows. You're the one that breaks your arms, your legs, your feet, all that stuff, right? And I was born and raised in Northeast Ohio in a conservative, Catholic middle-class household, right? So I say Catholic, and always say I'm a recovering Catholic, right? So I'm a rule follower by nature. But I really was very fortunate growing up in a household where my dad is Catholic and my mother was Protestant, right? So it was the Catholic and the Protestant part. It really gave me a nice flavor of who I am today and who I am spiritually and who I am as a person, right? So I also talk about growing up in the 70s, and in the 70s and 80s, you really, you didn't talk about emotions. You didn't talk about if there were problems, or, that whole idea of, big boys don't cry, right? Big boys don't show their emotions. So what happens? You shove those emotions under something, right? And eventually they come out. They have to, because as I said, we're emotional beings. So for me, it really took me, probably 40 some years to figure this out. And this program that I talked to, and I think this is critical to the folks on the line, if you really want to improve your emotional intelligence, is how does your programming affect you, and how does it kind of manifest in you? And for me, this is what I thought of it. This is where I kind of had gotten to as that kind of passive aggressive victim, right? So passive aggressive, which to me, I always say passive aggressive is aggressive. So for you folks, and this is key to hear, and the key is, how were you programmed? What was going on with you? Hopefully in today's world, we're able to grow our folks, or train our children to be more in touch with their feelings. I'm not saying feelings go away or you can't, but dealing with your feelings. So how are you programmed, right? Really question that. And I'll give you some ways of being able to kind of look at it from that way. So for me, obviously this was adapted from my past, my present, and kind of my future, but I've had some help along the way, right? There's a book, and this is a lot of what this is based on. This is the book of Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And it's one of these books where you buy it and you take an assessment. I was exposed to this in some leadership training, and I took this assessment, and I realized that I was emotionally illiterate. I really didn't know what to do with my feelings. I had these feelings. I classified these feelings. I buried these feelings, and I would eventually explode. And I exploded on members and people and staff. But when I took this assessment, it really opened my eyes, right? And then I started really getting into self-help books. There's one called Presence, and there's all kinds of different emotional ways to look at things and really drill down to your feelings and try to figure things out. So I think it was 2019, I did give a short presentation at the GIS, and this is adapted from this emotional intelligence for the turf professional, kind of get your mind right. This was the precursor to what we're talking about today. This was one of those lightning learning rounds where I talked for 7 minutes and kind of exposed some folks to this subject. And then last year I did a 2-hour seminar on this, where we talked about emotional intelligence for the turf professional. it looks like this class is going to morph into a 4-hour workshop at GIS next year, or this year, or I guess next year in Las Vegas. So kind of where it's coming from. So drilling down into the whole thing and looking at it from a standpoint of emotions, right? So what is that emotion? What is an emotion? It's that natural instinctive state of mind. You know, it's deriving from who you are, right? Your circumstances, your mood, your relationships with others, right? So when you look at these charts, and there's all kinds of charts out there, there's all kinds of ways to look at emotions, but you really have these 5 main emotions: happy, sad, angry, afraid, ashamed, right? And then you have some intensity here, right? And this is helpful as you begin this kind of journey to try to really drill down and find your feelings. And I'll show you how you can use that chart. I'm a big quote person, right? So I always like this quote of stand up, you know, stand up straight and realize who you are, that you tower over your circumstances, right? If you really feel that way and you really tell yourself that way, I'm an affirmation person, having affirmations, you tower over your circumstances, stand up straight, right? So really, I took that to heart. And when I look at this and I look at why EQ is important, right? So that's, when you look at it from a standpoint of your IQ, we all know that. That's been proven that IQ is set. It's set from the day you're conceived. There's really not a lot that you can affect it. Now, EQ is that skill that's kind of riding underneath that iceberg, right? It's that tree that has all those roots that are getting those nutrients and the water from the soils to be able to nourish that tree, right? So EQ, which is, they've kind of classified into emotional quotient, right? It's how you deal with emotions, can help you. And again, it's a skill. So why is it important? Because it kind of interacts with, you know, the whole IQ, you know, EQ and personality. IQ, as I said, you can't really, you can't affect it all. Personality is your personality. It's who you are. It's how you're raised. It's experiences that you've gone through. But EQ is really the one that interacts in these 3 different realms that set who you are as a person, right? So this whole idea, I was fortunate to be quoted at the GIS a couple years ago. EQ is set from birth. Emotional intelligence is a skill, something you can get better at. So when you look at it, and why is it important, right? So when you look at it from a neurological kind of standpoint, you know, it's everything you see, smell, hear, taste, and touch travels through your body in a form of electric signals, right? Pretty basic stuff, right? So it goes from here, the first arrow, that comes from wherever it's coming from. If it's a smell, obviously it's coming from your nose. If it's a feel or a touch, it's coming from your fingers or your toes or your body. And it's traveling through your brain, and it goes through your limbic system first. It has to go through that before it goes to your rational brain, right? So it has to travel. And this is traveling in milliseconds, right? You touch something, it's hot, you pull your hand away from it. Your rational brain takes over and pulls yourself away from it, right? So in order for your rational and your irrational or your limbic kind of system to kind of to work together, the timing of this is so critical, and the timing happens almost instantaneously. So it happens with you not really even imagining what's going on. It's happening, and it can't not happen any other way. It has to travel this way. So the double arrow here of going back and forth is critical. And what happens between this, and it goes from the rational brain back to the limbic and back and forth, is critical to success and how you deal with people, right? So when you look at EQ and you look at the relationship or the business aspect of things, you look at it from a standpoint, it impacts everything you do and say every day, right? Workplace, home, anywhere you're at. It's the single biggest predictor of your performance in a workplace situation. It's that strong, right? It's the strongest driver of leadership and personal excellence in who you are. And again, the great thing is it's a skill, and it can be honed over time. So it's been proven. When you look at the U.S. Air Force, they realize that when they hire folks that are qualified, they certainly have to qualify in all the accreditations that they need, and they have high EQ. They were really set up for success when you're talking about high stress, high consequence roles, right? They've proven to be successful there. What does the high stress, high consequence role sound like? It sounds like to me a golf course superintendent at times, right? High stress, high consequence type of role. You make a mistake, there could be some issues, right? So there's that part of it. there's this whole idea of, 8 things that people, smart people don't reveal about themselves. Like disclosing information about yourself at work it's an art, and it's tricky at times, and what you say and how you handle things is critical to your success and how you move up in your career. And then this whole idea of, habits of unlikable people, right? Those folks that are name droppers, the people that have come off as closed mind. I can't listen to that. I won't listen to that. The people that gossip, the sharing of too much on social media, which you see constantly every day. And then the one thing that, these folks, and we'll talk a little bit about the whole idea of emotional hijackers, right? These folks that say things to elicit a response in you. So really, you want to be a person that navigates. You want to be authentic. I'm not telling you to, stuff your feelings or don't be who you are, but you want to be smart about things and how you navigate in the workplace. So you really boil it down, it's into these 4 skills, right? It's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management. So we're going to look at these 4 in a little bit more detail. We're really going to hone on this one, the self-awareness. This is the most important thing that you can do. If you take anything away from today, self-awareness is the key, right? So it's being able to accurately perceive your own emotions. And the key here is as they happen, like what's going on with me, right? And as I said, and as we showed in that little diagram with the brain, this happens from through your limbic system into your rational brain. It happens, your irrational brain, it happens in seconds, in less than seconds. So you really got to pay attention there and how you react in certain situations, right? So this whole idea of this is where your self-confidence comes from. This is where your awareness of your emotional state comes from. This is how recognizing your behaviors and how they impact others, right? That person that I said, that emotional hijacker, for the most part, that person knows what they're doing and can set some people off, right? And sometimes you could use that to your advantage, and sometimes that's probably a thing that you want to avoid in these situations. So when you're talking about that and you're paying attention to how others influence your emotional state, right? So when this person does this, what happens to me? How does that trigger something that's going on with me? It's not them, and I know that word is probably overused in today's society, and you talk about emotions, but it really is triggering these emotions in you and what's going on with you. So again, number 1 skill, self-awareness. When you look at it, and we talked a little bit about emotional hijacks, we're going to get into it a little bit here in more detail. And this is that whole idea that moments when your emotions kind of control your behavior and you react without thinking, right? This is the person that, the road rage person, right? I used to be a person of road rage. I'm here to tell you, certainly, as somebody that spends about, now with Bear, I'm about 50,000 miles on the road every year. I've really had to deal with this, and I've really dealt with it in a lot of different ways. And I'll show you one way that you can deal with it and how I dealt with it and how I come out on the other side a lot better. The other thing too is, when you're talking about emotions and you're talking about hijackings and what's going on here, I don't think I'm ever looking for perfection. I'm looking for improvement, right? So with somebody, you take somebody like me that's was emotionally illiterate, the objective is to get better at things. And I'll tell you, my road rage incidents now are probably down. Out of 10 times, probably 8 of the times I can relax, I can figure things out, and I'll show you how I did that. So the more intense the emotions are, the greater likelihood that it will dictate your actions, right? So if it's a really strong emotion with you, it's something that was really strongly programmed in you, i.e. for me, the biggest emotion that I've drilled down to and figured out for the road rage was fear. And fear was really programmed into me as a young child and as I was growing up. And that's why I had such a strong emotional response when it came to road rage, because I felt fear for my own life. If the kids were in the car or my wife was in the car, what was going on with it, all right? So using your thoughts to take control over your emotions, right? So being able to sit with those emotions and being able to rationalize through those emotions and take control of the emotions, not eliminate the emotions, but take control of them. So as I said, thoughts don't take away the feeling, but it keeps the emotion from hijacking your behavior, right? That behavior of being able to go after somebody and blow the horn when you're talking road rage. Being able to say, okay, be very clear and say, I'm fine. Everybody in that car is fine. I have no reason to fear. We're not, our life's not in danger. So being able to do that. So the other thing, when you talk about emotional hijacking, then it really does demonstrate low EQ, right? The person that is not able to control their emotions, not being able to harness that and figure out what to do with them, really conveys that, right? So you're really showing your level of instability to people, right? When you go off the handle and somebody does something and you really kind of convey well, this person, I don't know if this person's very trustworthy. I don't know if they're really able and capable of holding it together when the crap hits the fan, right? And in all of our lives, I don't care what you're doing, what profession you're doing, the crap hits the fan sometimes, and being able to keep it together and be emotionally stable and being able to deal with them is critical to success and successful relationships. So I'm sticking on this skill, this self-awareness, because again, I think it's the most important skill of the four. When you look at it from a standpoint of, perceiving your emotion. So emotion is always going to be the first reaction. It can't not be, right? You have no control over that. You do have control over the thoughts that follow that emotion and how you react. However, this only happens if you're aware of the emotion that's going on. And for me, that's why the road rage thing happened, right? I really wasn't aware that I was fearful when somebody would cut me off or almost hit me, almost run into me. I was really ignorant to the fact that what was that fear? What was that feeling? I would just go off the handle, and it was road rage, right? So the trigger event, right? It's a prolonged emotional reaction. The trigger event, somebody cut me off. What's going on here? Triggers are shaped by our personal history, and we all have different triggers. We may have some that are similar. We may have some that are totally different. And as your EQ skills grow, you'll learn to spot the triggers, right? Figure out, oh, the trigger here is fear. What's going on? Let me look around me. I'm fine. Everybody in the car is fine. It's okay, right? And this will become habitual. I promise you. I've been working on this since about 2012-ish, 2013-ish, and it does take time, but it's something that will become habitual. So back to this. So we talked about the self-awareness. Now we're going to talk about really the second part of this, which kind of dovetails into everything else, the whole idea of self-management, right? So this is using your awareness of your emotions to stay flexible, right? Stay flexible. What's going on, right? And the biggest part here is direct your behavior in a positive way. Now that little bio that Ben wrote, and it was something that GCSA had put out, and I forgot when I sent it, but I also sent it for a reason. In there, it talks about emotions, and it talks about going through and try to figure it out. As somebody that's on a sales in a sales role now, I've really tried to really compensate with this skill of trying to be somebody that listens, right? If I listen, I can try to understand folks, right? So this is picking up the mood of a room, walking into a boardroom, walking into a boardroom now. Wow, how about all the emotions that are going on in our world, and trying to figure out what the emotion is and how can I show that I care about these folks that are in this room, right? So really hearing what people or a person is saying to you, really listening to them, not thinking about, well, this is what I'm going to say next, but really listening. And this is that old one you learn in communication schools, right? Silence is a communication helper. You know why? Because silence implies that the person is listening. They're not thinking about what they're saying. I'm not saying that you don't have discussions where you go back and forth, but if you really truly listen to folks, sometimes there's going to be some pauses in your communication. So social awareness. So when you look at that, right, this all comes down to relationship management and how you navigate through the emotions of the relationships, right? So this is to use your emotional awareness of yourself and others to manage interactions successfully, right? It's all about conflict and conflict resolution, and conflict brings you closer to folks, right? So when you look at this one, this is a similar one to your self-regulation, right? Getting well along with others. Yourself is primary, but the others are there behind. Handling conflict effectively, getting through conflict resolution, clearly expressing your ideas and your information, how you have a clear plan of what you are, who you are, right? So this is where empathy kind of comes into that whole interaction and how you manage your interactions with folks to a better outcome, because it's all conflict, right? So you really look at these, it's recognition and regulation, right? Recognition in personal and others, and regulations of self and your relationships that you have, right? So as we look and we look to go ahead here, I'm gonna give you just a few little exercises on ways to maximize some of these 4 skills, and I'm gonna focus a lot on this first skill, right, the self-awareness one. So for me, as I talked about, number 1, it was that whole watch your feelings, right? So watch your feelings like that hawk in that tree, like watch them like a hawk, right? You're looking, okay, what happened when this guy cut me off the road? Drill that feeling down and feel it and figure out what it is, right? What's going on here? Am I sad? Am I hurt? Am I miserable? And am I unhappy? Am I upset? What is the feeling? Drill it down, right? Because as that little picture up there says, anger is just sad's bodyguard. You're sad, or you're happy, or you're glad. And feeling the range of emotions is a great thing, and we all do it. We have the ability, but it really is drilling down the emotion and figuring out what's going on with it. And wow, it's a life-changing type of scenario. I had somebody come up at one of my seminars and said, "You've changed my life." And when somebody tells you that, you're kind of taken back a little bit. And I'm like, "You're going to have to explain that one." He's like, "Well, I grew up in this military household. I wasn't allowed to deal with my feelings. I stuffed my feelings down, and I never realized why I would just explode either at home or with my crew or my staff. And now I've kind of realized that why I do that is there's a lot of fear in my life. There's a lot of anger in my life. And when I can deal with those, then I can figure out how to successfully navigate through relationships." So watch and drill down your feelings, right? So this whole idea of, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, this whole idea of stop treating your feelings as good or bad, right? There is no good, there is no bad feelings. They're feelings, right? So what happens is when you do start treating them as good or bad and refrain putting one label on top of a letter, on top of another, I'm angry. That's a bad feeling. No, it's a feeling. It's okay. It is okay to be angry. Now, what you do with anger is critical to your relationships, right? How you handle anger is critical. All those so-called negative feelings, angry, from sad, how you deal with feelings is that critical. But if you put, well, that's a bad feeling, then you got to deal with bad, then you got to deal with feeling, and you get all haywire here, right? So refrain from doing that. Suspending judgment of your emotions allows you to kind of take care of them, allows you to run their course, and they vanish. Like I talked about earlier with me, the road rage incident's a great one because it allowed me to say fear. Fear is the big one. There's some other ones that may creep into that, and I'll show you how to kind of do some of that. But it was really fear for me, and it really drives a lot of who I am, and it was really programmed in me. So being able to deal with them and letting them run the course, they eventually will vanish. I promise you that. So we're all pretty fortunate because we're in a time frame now where maybe life has slowed down a little bit. John Kaminsky and I had that discussion before all you folks got online that, we are busy, but we also have time. For me, the time I talk about is I'm home at my house every night, right? So I have time to do some things instead of spending 100 and so nights on the road in a hotel room. So I'm really a big proponent of this, writing down your feelings, right? The biggest challenge to feelings is being objective about them, right? That whole idea of bad, good, right? Being objective. When you write them down, you're able to. What events triggered strong emotions for that day? What happened there? How did you respond to them? You'll see patterns, and you'll better understand your tendencies. I did this. I continue to do this, that I write down my feelings. I don't do it every day. I was pretty good at every day for probably about a couple years of my life, writing down, what is this feeling? How am I feeling this? Setting with the feeling, again, so it can kind of just fade away. Paying attention to people and situations that push your buttons, right? those emotional hijackers triggering strong emotions in you, writing those down, looking through those, describes your emotions as you feel every day. I know some of this stuff seems kind of zen-y, I get it, but able to deal with your feelings, it's the quote at the bottom, right? Writing is how I sort out the craziness in my mind, because we all kind of, the irrational feelings are, there's a certain amount of crazy there because they're irrational. Record the physical sensations that accompany them too, right? What hurts? Your belly, your back, you get tense in your arms when you're feeling these emotions. And then you'll be able to see yourself more clearly. Like, what's going on? What happened in that road rage incident? What happened when that member came up to me and said this about that? How you react in certain situations. That's really what you want to write down, right? That's your feelings. What was the trigger moment, right? So the other one, when it talks to this and you talk about, reflecting and getting to know yourself under stress, I was, again, fortunate to be quoted by a good friend of mine, Nick Janovich, of, stress will make you stupid, right? So I kind of corrected that a little bit. And I always say, stress can or will make you stupid. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But, it's that old, some of you young folks may not know Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson used to always say, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face or punched in the face, right? That's why I kind of look at golf course superintendents. You have a plan, you're trying to work that plan, and then you get punched in the face, right? You got 10 90-degree plus days, you got low moisture, you're trying to water, you're trying to spray, you're trying to motivate your staff, and you can get stressed out, and it could make you stupid, right? We all deal with more and more stress every day, right? Cell phones, all the stuff that we deal with. Awareness is critical in dealing with how you react, how you feel yourself under stress. What are the indicators of this pre-stress? Do you get nervous? Do you start to stammer a little bit, maybe with your voice? You sweat, your palms, your hands may sweat. So really, what are those physical signs of what's going on with you? And then what you do with it's obviously the most important thing, how you handle that stress. I put the picture of the air fryer, right? That's a stressful situation for a lot of us as we're air frying greens and we're trying to fight weather and people and schedules and coordinate folks and coordinate top dressing and dragging and all that stuff. So it can be stressful, and how you deal with it is critical, right? So when you look at it and you look at it from the standpoint of maximizing your self-awareness, right? This whole idea of breathing, right? Your brain needs about 20% of your oxygen. This happens automatically, right? These basic functions, breathing, heart rate, pulse, all that happens automatically. So it needs 20% of your oxygen. Shallow breathing deprives your brain of oxygen, right? So when your brain's deprived of oxygen, that's where it does. It can't make you dumb. It can't make you stupid. You react differently when you don't breathe. One of the biggest things I can tell folks, if you feel under stress, and you'll see this a lot, right? Try this. Breathe in like you're pretending to smell that flower. Breathe out like you're blowing on that leaf. Breathing exercises. I do it all the time. You know where I do it? If I'm going into a situation that's maybe a little contentious, or I'm in a situation where maybe I'm giving a presentation, I breathe a little bit, and that you'll see it. If you do this exercise right now, you'll see your clarity will improve immediately, right? So this whole idea of taking self-control, when you're maximizing your self-management, right? They always talk about when you think positive things happen, right? When you focus on problems happen. They estimate that you have about 50,000 thoughts a day, right? Strong relationship between what you feel and what you think. And then that whole idea of how you feel and how you think and how that affects you physically and emotionally. You forget that you're doing it at times, right? Similar to your breathing, because these thoughts are going throughout your 50,000 thoughts a day. They're happening constantly, especially a lot of us that are maybe solitude working and we're out there and we're thinking a lot and doing a lot of thinking about things, right? So for me, there was some big changes that I made. This whole idea of, I always say I don't really like comedians that are kind of self-deprecating. I don't know. For me, it just I don't think it's funny. But this whole idea of like, change that mindset from I'm an idiot, from that to, you know what, I made a mistake and I'm human. And as I said earlier, perfection isn't the goal here. The goal is improvement, right? To get better at things. And this one really impacted me in a great way. I don't know. I saw this on one of these silly talk shows, right? And this just goes to show you that sometimes you could find some nuggets of information just about anywhere. And this whole idea of I have to go to work. Tomorrow I have to wake up and I have to go over here and I have to do this. If you just change that to, I get to go to work tomorrow. I get to wake up and go to that golf course and see that sun come up. I get to do that. I don't have to do that. I get to do that. It really does change your outlook. So that's self-control, taking control of that on your own, right? So social awareness. I'm not very good at this, but there are tons of books out there that talk about body language, right? This whole idea of people say a lot, so I watch what they do. I try to do that, right? How about this one? Look at that. Look at Keith Happ there, a mentor of mine. Look at how cool he is. Goodness, that's what, the 2016 Open at Oakmont. He is so cool. Look at that body language, right? And then you got stuff like this, trade publications. This is one I had a really big problem with, right? The GM in the foreground and the superintendent in the background. Like that one really bothered me. But then this is actually a TAS visit that I had at the course I was at. You think these folks are worried about much as far as on that green? Look at their body language. He seems to be doing okay. Greens are good. They're healthy, right? So body language is critical to kind of picking up on what people are checking out, checking their posture, their eye movement, their hand gestures, this whole idea of, figuring out how people really feel so you can plan and have an appropriate response, right? Again, there's tons of literature on body language and what body language says and trying to figure out how to get better at social awareness. This is one that I kind of have on my calendar to try to watch and try to be cognizant of. And I think for me, it's going to help me with that empathy issue that I kind of talked about. So when I talk about this one, I kind of talked about it earlier when I became on this side of things in the industry of listening, right? That whole idea of it's a skill. It requires you to focus on what the person's saying, not just the words, but about their body language, their tone, their speed, the volume of their voice, right? It really does require a focus. The one thing I learned, early on is as far as my role now is that, a lot of people don't really want to hear what I did on the golf course as a golf course superintendent. Certainly there's times to interject, and it certainly brings a lot of credibility because, as I always say, I lived in the belly of the beast for about 16 years as a superintendent. I get it, but they really want you to listen. Try this one with your significant other, right? For me, solving my spouse's problems is not what really is the charge. The charge is what? Listening to the problems, right? Listening to what she's trying to say, not interjecting, well, this is what you should do, or this is what you shouldn't do. Listen, and you'll see, it's amazing. We all have those friends that listen to us, right? And you really feel good when somebody listens to you. So being somebody that can practice that art of listening, hopefully you can inspire others to do the same, right? So the last one here is, ways to maximize your relationship management, right? So this whole idea, right? Taking feedback well. And I cropped this picture, but this picture is kind of, to me, it's possibly that golf course superintendent, right? And it's that, I think Tom Nicolai up at Michigan State wrote that green speak book, and he dedicated it to the superintendent that heard these were the best greens and these were the worst greens on the same day, right? Feedback and everything, we all deal with feedback in our lives. So taking it well, right? So the big idea is that feedback is a gift. Look at it as a gift, right? Really drill it down. Sure, you got to consider the source. You got to figure out what's, sometimes the motivation or this person. But I'm telling you, a lot of what folks tell you and a lot of feedback is there's definitely some nuggets in there, right? Listen. Sometimes you need to listen. Sometimes you need to just thank them and move on, even if you don't agree with them, right? So taking feedback well will help you with those relationship, as far as when you're talking with relationship management. You have it every day. Just about every day we all get that feedback, negative, positive. I think we focus a lot on the negative, right? Because we think, man, I did this, or the whole idea of, a lot of us golf course superintendents, somebody would say, this golf course was the best golf course. Yeah, but this isn't done or that's not done. No, just say thank you. Thank you for that feedback. It's a gift. What do you do with a gift? You say thank you and you move on. You don't give them every excuse of why things weren't perfect. You move on. Consider it a gift. So when you talk about relationships, right, and you're dealing with folks, this whole idea of, I was horrible at this as a golf course superintendent. When you care, show it, right? It's easy. It's easy. You've got people around you every day that are doing great things. So give them some good feedback, connect and show them that you care, right? Finding simple things that you can do every day is critical. Thank you, or a thank you card, or a thank you soda, or a thank you energy drink or something. Thank folks. If you care, show it. And I think most of us care. And I don't think I was I was a superintendent that didn't care. I was one that wasn't able to express my care because I didn't realize, oh, I care for these people. And you should genuinely care for them. So kind of putting it all together, and this is your kind of homework assignment, if you will. If you really want to kind of hone in on the golf course superintendent and kind of what putting a lot of these skills together, I advise you to take a look at this Golf Course Management magazine article of October 2018. Esteemed Superintendent Chris Carson in New Jersey, maybe some of you folks have worked for him or heard from him. He wrote this. I counted the words one time. It's less than 1,500 words. Take a look at this. This is utter genius. And when you talk about emotional intelligence. Now, one thing about Chris has been at the club he's at for 35 years or so as a golf course superintendent. And I will tell you, any person that puts in that amount of time in a golf course it has a lot of emotional intelligence going for them. So take a look at that article at your leisure. And just in summary, right? Begin that journey of being good to yourself and others, right? All relationships are emotionally based. Think about your feelings, drill down those feelings, and hopefully that can help you kind of deal with the feelings. Be present, let those feelings run their course, because they will, right? So with that, I say that whole idea of stand up straight, realize who you are. You tower over your circumstances and stand up straight. You're not just that person that was programmed from age 0 to 22 or 23 or so. And in closing, just if I can help you, there's my contact information. I'm around, text, email, phone call, whatever. You'll see some of my classes at GIS, hopefully coming up in the next few years. And actually, I think we have a few minutes for questions, if we have any, John, or any kind of.
Yeah, we do. First of all, thanks. That was awesome. I figured I would, we do have a question in the box. I don't know if any of the turf students like Kyle or Ben have anything, but I have some questions too. So Kyle or Ben, you guys got anything? If not, I'll ask. So someone said, Anthony Petrillos, I think that's how you pronounce it. He said, How to Win Friends and Influence People, the Dale Carnegie book. It's a great read and enforces everything you spoke about. Do you have any other readings that you might suggest? I think at the beginning and we'll put this up on YouTube. I think at the beginning you showed a slide that had a bunch of books on it, but maybe you could just.
Yeah, so the big one, John, is that, and Anthony, thanks for the question, is emotional intelligence, the 2.0. If you get into that whole system, they really, the group is called Talent Smart. They really give you a lot of those articles. Those 3 articles I pulled about business are from there. For me, the other kind of life-changing one was the book Presence. It's actually a social psychologist out of Harvard that did a TED Talk. Her name was Amy Cuddy. If you look up that TED Talk on Amy Cuddy, it's about 15 minutes, and it's kind of really amazing what she reveals there. I talk to folks, and Anthony, I'm not sure your situation about help them with job prep. If there's anything with job prep I can tell you about, it would be presence, right? This whole idea of bringing your true self to that interview, because what happens usually is what you get nervous and the true self doesn't come through, right? So bringing that true self. When I talk about emotional intelligence too, you talk about jobs. I always talk about jobs and getting jobs, right? We all have the ability to mow greens, to spray greens, to fertilize, those skills, those hard skills. These soft skills that we're talking about, that's the one that's going to set you apart. Folks, when they're interviewing folks, they're looking for a couple things. Certainly, you should be able to do all those hard skills. But the second 2 things they're looking for is what? Suitability, how you're going to fit into their operation. And then they really are looking at this emotional intelligence piece, how you react under pressure, what you do under pressure, how your emotions can get the best of you or not the best of you. So that's how that's the kind of the 2 avenues I would go down through. I forget, I Googled emotional intelligence one day and I don't know, I haven't had like 50 million responses. So there's a lot of information out there on the internet.
I had a question for you. It was like, all right, it's an overwhelming concept, you know, getting to the point where you can be emotionally aware or have emotional intelligence, and like you got to start somewhere. And obviously there's a few books that are out there. Is there anything else, you know, maybe writing in your journal that you did? Is there anything else that you could say is a good starting point for people that want to like try to get into this and see how it is? It's just, I'm also, you know, born in the 70s, so I'm kind of along that same line of, you know, that you had and you shared. So
yeah. So in my seminar this past one I had GIS, John Jennings was in it from Shinnecock, and we talked afterwards, and John's like, I grew up in that same time frame that you did. I grew up in the industry the same time frame you did. And he found that writing down emotions and what he was going through and trying to figure out how to deal with those emotions was the way he kind of dealt with things. I would echo those statements of writing down. That was one of the biggest things I did, was writing down those emotions and then going through them. It's a matter of, certainly when you write things down, you kind of go through it because you have to, because you're writing them down, but going through it periodically, highlighting maybe the emotional part. This takes a while. As I said, I'm still on that journey of self-awareness, right? What caused this to happen here? Like, why am I angry? Like, I was one of those people that if something triggered anger in me, I wanted to just punch that person. And sometimes I'm surprised I didn't, which thank God I never have. But why? Like, why do I want to punch this person right now? Why does this person bother me? Like, being aware of, like, I'm in a meeting. We all sit in meetings, right? And people say things, and you're like, that person just said something to me that I need to come across the table, and I don't know. But really sitting with those, John, is the key, and figuring out where that comes from, where the programming happened, you know, how that manifested, how your upbringing and who you are and your parents. And I'm a pretty normal upbringing. I can imagine some folks, but dealing with your emotions, the first part is identifying the emotion, right? And it's hard to sometimes because everything's covered on top of everything. So drilling down those emotions, writing them down, sitting with them. Maybe that's your quiet time exercise once a week, once every day. What is the emotion that I'm feeling right now? Because and a lot of times, if the emotion causes that negative behavior, that's the ones you really got to sit with. The negative behavior will get you, you know, that collateral damage. So I would say that really, you know, there's some folks that go to therapists to deal with, you know, emotions.
that's what I was going to ask about next. Like, where do you think that goes to, the, you know, the next step? I listen to Howard Stern a lot. And he goes to therapist twice a week, and he just says, like, if you don't go see somebody, you're definitely not going to be able to figure out, you know, your inner self and stuff. But
yeah, I do that. You know, I've gone to a therapist for years. I haven't gone most recently, but I think a lot of this is a journey too. You're not going to get to a point where you're emotionally so fit, right? It's like your health, you know, your physical health. It's what you do every day, and how you deal with it. And sometimes you need help. One of the biggest things growing up in the 70s for me is I was afraid to ask for help, right? I was stuck in perfectionism, right? So perfectionism is a horrible taskmaster, right? There's a Virgil Robinson, if you know Virgil, superintendent down in Virginia, that wrote a famous article it was entitled, "Perfection is only marginally acceptable," right? Perfection is a pursuit of wasted time. Don't even say we're trying to get perfect, because you're not. You'll never get there, so you're wasting your time. That's just an ego bullshit, if you ask me. It is. It's ego. So that may be another thing you kind of check and look at is, where's your ego at? How's your ego feed into these emotions? Who you are, how you treat other people, writing stuff like that down. But yeah, therapists can be helpful in sorting through emotions and emotional awareness. And where my therapist was really helpful is sitting with emotions and saying, okay, what do you feel? Do you feel it in your gut? Do you feel it in your arms, your neck, your shoulders? And it's the weirdest thing in the whole world, because you don't want to tell this guy that, right? I didn't. Like, what the hell is he talking about? But you do. You feel emotions physically a lot of times. But yeah, therapists can be helpful. You know what? Talking to a friend. I am so fortunate that I have some really emotionally intelligent friends that are so helpful. But for the longest time, I wasn't listening to them. And if I don't listen to them, I'm not going to gain anything, right? So friends are helpful. Spouses are helpful. Yeah.
Darrin, I just want to say, I just really wanted to amplify again the part where you're talking about empathy. Where you're talking about, I'm feeling this emotion, and how am I going to respond? I think that was a big. I really took that away from that, just from, I think there's moments that I've done in my life that, like, you don't always respond in the right way. You're quick to jump to the conclusion or something. Some definitely, we don't really talk about a lot, but this is all great stuff, and I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a skill, and it's something that in today's world, I will tell you, I have 2 sons that are millennials, and they've really taught me how to be more emotionally intelligent. You know why? Because they're in touch with their emotions, and I'm so thankful that they were raised like that. Look at it, it's 2020 and we're talking about emotions. In 1980, we weren't talking about emotions. If you talked about emotions, you were banned. Like, people just didn't want to deal with you. But we're able to talk about emotions, and
I don't even think it's 1980. I think that extends up into the 90s. I mean, I feel like
probably, yeah.
It's like it's only been in the last 5 to 10 years that it's even been addressed. And I base that on, like, running the 2-year program for the past 11 years. And 11 years ago, it was everybody wanted to be a US Open superintendent, and they wanted to work 90 hours a week, and they were like grinding it out. And if you ask my students in the last 3 years, the first thing that comes up is work-life balance, and that kind of,
Yeah.
like they it's just different. And it's not a bad thing. It's just different. It's just different than it was.
Yeah, that's like me. I had no work-life balance. No, zero.
Yeah.
I was horrible at it. And that there's some consequences to that, right? Relationships, but yeah, work-life balance is part of this, right? Being able to recognize what makes you tick.
We'll see how many people cheer for work-life balance when they're stuck at home with their entire family for 2 more months, and then they're going to be like, you know what, spending some more time at work might not be so bad.
I hear that from some of my colleagues saying, usually I'm on the road those 100 nights. Like, I need a little reprieve, which, balance is important to everything, right?
Yeah, I miss the travel, but from my wife and our standpoint, like, we live in a small condo, and we haven't gotten in each other's way. It hasn't bothered us at all. It's been pretty good, but I do miss traveling and getting back out and not being cooped up. But yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions out there? I know that we had one question that came in. There's still a few people in here. I think we're going to wrap up here in the next couple minutes, but I wanted to give people the opportunity in case anybody had anything. Darrin, I'll say to you while we're waiting to see if there's any last questions. Awesome information. I got to imagine that a 4-hour seminar on this, where you could actually, like, get into breakout groups and talk about things and think about ways to improve, and having, like, a more in-depth discussion on this is probably pretty good. So hopefully it's a good shout out for people for Vegas.
Yeah. And it's that, even the 2-hour seminar was great interaction, and people asked some really cool questions of, like, what was your low point, or how did this, you kind of asked it, I think, earlier, about how did you come upon this? And I always talk about, being fired, and, firing, I would have fired myself, and telling my wife I was fired, and she's like, well, that's good, because you turned into quite an asshole over the last right? And if you don't wake up from stuff like that, there's something really, really wrong with you. But
yeah, it's tough. I was going to ask you if you had any really bad road rage reactions, or went raging on somebody else that turned it back on you.
No, I never really was like one that would, I don't carry a gun, but like, or go after them. But I mean, I had my own level of road rage, of beeping horns and flipping people off, and it was enough. One of those things for me too is my wife. If my wife was in the car, she would say, why are you telling us that? It's not our fault that guy did that, so we don't want to hear it. I'm like, oh shit, that's a pretty good comment.
Right, you're putting the energy towards the wrong group of people. Around town, like, I'm so used to being in DC where traffic is crazy. If I get into traffic in State College now, I go nuts. Like, yeah, any little bit of traffic, and I don't normally drive anymore. But if I'm like driving and I'm stuck at a light and somebody doesn't turn fast enough, you know, they like wait too long, I'm like on my horn, flipping them off. And my wife always says to me, she's like, you know, this is a small town, and like that's probably going to be your boss or somebody else. Like maybe you should like, you know, calm it down a little bit. We're like 2 minutes from home, we'll be fine.
Well, I would challenge you to figure out why. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Like, what's
I get very frustrated and with anybody that doesn't keep up with the level of speed in my brain, right? So like when I'm in a conversation with people, I'm usually like 2 or 3 sentences ahead, and that's a problem. Like I end up like not listening to where they are now, but listening to where they're going to be in 2 or 3 minutes. And a lot of times I actually am that far ahead, but it's a major downfall because I just get impatient. I get super impatient about things.
And I'm your opposite, right? As a dyslexic, I have a really hard time with comprehension. So I really need the time to listen, you know? And if I expect somebody to listen to me, then I better listen to them. I really believe that. I mean, it's how you treat people.
All right, we got one more question I'm going to get to, but then I'm going to go because I got to give a lecture. So Anthony says he currently has an employee that constantly drives him crazy, and he's always constantly thinking about firing the individual. How do you work on keeping your cool with something like that? Do you have any suggestions? When is enough enough? I mean, I'm sure at some point there's a time where like if people are being a little crazy that you got to just bite the bullet and fire them. But
yeah, there's certainly people in our lives that trigger that stuff, right? But I would really sort out the trigger. Like why is he driving you crazy? Because he's late, or because he's not a very good employee, or so then you go through the whole exercise of, okay, what if I get rid of this person? What's my alternative, right? If that's really what you're trying to do. But I would really like that person, what they're doing isn't your fault, but it is affecting you. And it's just like the road rage like that. I don't know what's going on in that person's life. There could be somebody in that car in front of me that's dying and they cut me off to get to the hospital. I don't know that. So trying to figure out what's going on in their life, but also the biggest thing, the only thing you have control over is how you react to what's going on around you. So it sounds like this person's in your head a little bit, right? But why are they in your head? Like, what's the deal? You know, and I hear all kinds of people give me excuses. Yeah, but they do this and they do that. Yeah, but you can't control what they do. You can only control what you can control. Now, there are people that you probably just need to fire and get rid of because they're just not golf course people, or they're not good, productive workers, right? I get that, and that's not what I'm saying here. But I wonder why this person bothers you. That'd be the first place I would go to. And then maybe you have to go to the point where you're like, have a talk with the person. Maybe there's something going on in their life that they really, who knows? A lot of people, you know, the stuff that all of us deal with, who knows what we deal with? Maybe there's something in their life that you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that was going on. And you cut the person a little bit of a break, or you try to help them out.
That's a good place to end. I'm going to have to call it because I have to go teach this class, and I got to end this recording. I'm going to stop the recording now. I want to thank you, Darrin, for coming, and Kyle and Ben also for joining us. I will end the recording, and if anybody wants to stick around, they can talk, but I got to bounce out.
Thank you.